We'll proceed as planned then. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Planning Committee meeting on this cold, dank and dark evening. Start with item 1. Apologies for absence. I'll do the housekeeping after the apologies. Apologies for absence. Councillor Perry has apologised, of course.
And we've also received apologies from Councillors Round and Munford.
Right, I'll take substitute members straight away. Notification of substitute members. Councillor Gooch for...
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Gooch substituting for Councillor Munford.
Any other substitute members? No, I don't see any. Visiting members, got Councillor Pickett. What item are you here for, Councillor? Thank you. He's not here. If he's here, he's here. Right. Now, there's no fire drill this evening, members, so if the alarm goes off, it really is an emergency. Mrs Snook will find the way out and let us know, I hope. At least I hope she'll let us know. And we are webcasting this meeting. If anyone else is webcasting it, I don't intend to stop you, but it would be helpful to know so we can tell the public. Anyone else webcasting this or recording it? No? Good. Excellent. We are moving on to items withdrawn from the agenda. Are there any? I should hope not. It's a very short agenda. No items withdrawn from the agenda. Item 5, date of adjourned meeting, 24th of November 2016. I hope we won't need an adjourned meeting, as it is a short agenda. But that's the one that's in the diary. Item 6, any business the Chairman regards as urgent, including the urgent update report as it relates to matters to be considered at the meeting. You have a very short, Councillor Bolton will be pleased, urgent update report, plus a letter from Gallagher's, which isn't quite an urgent update report, but has been circulated for your information. And we have, yes, we can take them together. Item 7, disclosures by members and officers, please. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to item 14/16/503/863 at Newnan Court Farm, Sittingbourne Road, I am a member of the Boxley Parish Council, but I've taken no part in discussion of this item, so I therefore intend to speak and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other disclosures? No. Thank you very much. We will take disclosures of lobbying as and when we reach the item. Item 9, to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. I'm not aware of any. Thank you. Item 10, minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of October, adjourned to the 3rd of November 2016. These have been circulated and also both sets of minutes have been circulated. Are these a correct record of the meeting, members? Oh, sorry, you've got a point on...
It's a matter of right.
No, we'll come to that in a minute. We've agreed the minutes. Unusually, because we don't normally have this, but I'm taking a matter arising.
Thank you, Chair. It regards a deferred item and an update on an advertisement consent application for Huntford CEP School, Bishop's Lane, and the officer provides the following update. It's regarding an application involving 2 signboards to the school site. There's been some correspondence and the officer indicates that it would appear that the more contentious of the two signs, the one that the parish council and local residents objected to, should now have been temporarily removed pending possible relocation to an alternative site. The officer has not as yet been to the site to check the removal. He anticipates that if an alternative location for the sign is found, the deferred advertisement consent application would be amended as appropriate, and after reconsultation with the parish council, local residents, etc., the application would be reported back to committee.
Thank you very much for that update, Mr. Chairman. Come now to item 11, presentation of petitions. I believe we do have a petition, but it will be taken with the item. Is that right, Mrs. Snook?
A petition may be referred to by an objector in relation to Freeman Way.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we proceed with item 14 on page 16 of your agenda, plot 9, Eclipse Park, Sittingbourne Road. I ask the officer to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for a proposal for a new supermarket and associated car parking at plot 9 of Eclipse Park, adjacent to the A249 and junction 7 of the M20. The recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to a legal agreement, conditions and referral to the Secretary of State. I will briefly take you through the published urgent update report, which concerns a few matters. First of all, responses to some points Councillor Harwood has made regarding landscaping and sustainable energy issues. It is proposed that these are dealt with by condition. Councillor Harwood has subsequently indicated he is happy with this outcome. I don't propose to go through the matters in detail. They are in front of you in writing. Secondly, there is a need for us to consult the Secretary of State should planning permission be resolved to be granted. As a consequence, there's an additional recommendation added to that effect. Thirdly, there are a couple of minor amendments to the report in paragraph 5.07 under 3.1 of the urgent update, and on paragraph 7.37, again under item 3.2 of the urgent update. Similarly, there are three suggested amended conditions, one involving condition 5, some amendments to a landscaping condition. Secondly, a proposed amendment to condition 22 regarding location of bus stops. And thirdly, an additional condition, a new condition, condition 23, regarding the materials to be used on what we're calling a prow feature of the building, which I will be showing you as part of the presentation in a moment. So, I'll just briefly take you through some photographs and graphics of the site. The site is a former park and ride site with over 500 car parking spaces, as was, located in the western side of the A249 junction with junction 7 of the M20, to the north of Eclipse Park with the existing Tower Gate office, to the south, the Hilton Hotel and the next store. The ownership of the site is, red line is shown in red, the site in the top corner there, and the ownership within the applicant's ownership is in blue. This is a proposal for a supermarket, and here we have a plan of the supermarket shown in the corner of the site with the car parking to the west, access from the south and the Tower Gate office to the south. I've now got a series of photographs I'll briefly take you through. That happened to take last Friday. It was a nice sunny morning. So view northwest from the southwest corner of the site. A view north from the southeast corner of the site, just behind the Towergate office. A view west from the southeast corner, and a view north along the eastern boundary towards Junction 7. A couple more views. This one is from the west of the site, with the fuzziest site to actually to the left, not the right, it says there. And again, the Towergate building to the right, looking east, and that's looking east from the western boundary. This shows the TPO trees which are proposed to be removed as part of the application. And again, a view east from the western boundary and a view looking southeast, showing Towergate and the central Eclipse Park sites, which have planning permission for office use but have not been implemented. This was my attempt to go down as close as I could to the motorway, so forgive the lush vegetation. I didn't want to venture down onto the carriageway. And this is the view north of the western boundary of the site, and a view of the central element of Eclipse Park, with Eclipse House behind. This is the site which has an extant permission for office use, and the view of the roundabout at the bottom of this application site. This is a view down from the country park up Detling Hill, showing Maidstone in the distance, and another view from that location. I've got a further view later on showing the actual site from that location. This is another one, an aerial photo of the site itself. This is a representation of the location of the site in relation to the town centre, which is a topic I'll come on to in terms of the retail impact of the proposal. I now have some graphics that were submitted as part of the application itself. This is a 3D view looking north up the 249 with the Waitrose building as proposed on the left. A view from the 249 looking south, Towergate, and then the Waitrose on the right there. This is the sort of prow feature that I mentioned earlier. And then some pictures of the representation of the store itself, showing the ragstone walling, other materials. This is the photograph I referred to earlier, showing a view down from the 249 of the location of the Waitrose site, which is not visible from that location. And now I have a series of photos showing the prow feature. This is the prow, as it's called, as proposed, but we did look at some alternatives, and indeed the new condition 23 has suggested that the materials covering this element would be subject to further submission. So just to give you an idea of the kind of discussions we have had and the kind of materials we have looked at, but that will be something that, should the committee decide to approve, we'll come back to. I finally have a few representative elevations. This is the elevation from the east, showing the dotted line, showing the extent of the embankment, so you'd only see the top bit of the store. The rest of it would be in a dip from that location, and that's a closer view of that corner. And from the other side, this is a layout of Eclipse Park, showing a site to the west which has consent for a hotel, the central site which has consent for offices not been implemented, Towergate next, the Hilton Hotel and existing offices. This also shows the location of the new bus stops proposed as part of the package. A couple more photos of the store itself. View from the west and the car park. Some more elevations. And finally, I've got some landscaping plans and planting plans. Again, those are covered by condition, so I'm not proposing to go through those in great detail today. I think just to briefly take you through the main issues related to the proposal. Objections have been received from 3 local residents, 1 local bus company, Tesco's and Medway Council. I don't propose to go through these objections in detail, they are in the report. 1 local resident has written in support of the proposal. There's been no objection to the highways impacts of the proposal considering the previous park and ride use of the site. 3 bus stops and associated improvements are proposed as part of the proposal, along with funding to assess improvements to public transport between the site and the town centre. There is limited impact on visual amenity and the prowl feature is subject to a planning condition. Impact on biodiversity, landscape, drainage and sustainability are considered acceptable. The proposal conflicts with the employment designation, which in the 2000 plan is for B2 general industry, but marketing for such uses has indicated a lack of demand and the proposal is considered acceptable on that basis. The proposal is considered to provide considerable economic benefits in the form of approximately 200 jobs, 620,000 annual business rates and a substantial local expenditure and represents an investment of £14 million in Maidstone. The impact on retail issues is a key point. Alternative sites for this store were explored, considering this is an out-of-town location, not normally preferred for retail uses, but no available retail alternative site was identified. The impact on existing shops was considered, and it is possible that there may be a significant impact on the Mid-Kent shopping centre. However, the existing Waitrose at Allington has 17 years to run on its lease, and it's not considered it will close as a consequence of the new proposal. However, to cover that possibility, officers have been negotiating to secure a sum of money to mitigate such an impact should it occur. You will see, as circulated, Gallagher's as applicants for this proposal have put forward an update of that negotiation. It's an ongoing negotiation, and the recommendation is that you delegate that matter to officers to resolve. In conclusion, is to approve, subject to a legal agreement, referral to the Secretary of State and conditions. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask the legal officer to introduce how public speaking will work this evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a short announcement for members of the public and in particular those who are speaking on an item this evening. As you just heard, an item is announced by the chairman and then the planning officer introduces the item. The chairman will then call the speakers. When you hear your name called, please can you come to the table in front of you and take a seat. To speak, can you press the middle button? You do not need to hold it down. The button will turn green and the ring around the mouthpiece on the microphone will turn red. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and you'll see your time counting down on the screen in the corner behind me, on the right-hand side to myself. At the end of the 3 minutes, I'll tell you when your time is up. Once you've finished speaking, please press the middle button. It'll turn white and then return to your seat. Yeah, okay. You will hear some of the speakers referred to as visiting members. They are members of the council, but they don't sit on this committee. They also have 3 minutes to speak, but they have no right to vote on any of the applications. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I see Mrs. Davidson for the applicant, please? If you come forward, please. As the officer said, you've got 3 minutes.
Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mary Davidson, the agent for Waitrose on this planning application. My reason for wanting to speak this evening is to convey to you how passionate we are about bringing this development forward. We've worked hard with your officers and Kent County Council to make this happen, and we are delighted with the positive recommendation. As you can see from Mr Chapman's very thorough report, no stone has been left unturned in our discussions. There are, however, just a couple of aspects that I want to touch on. Firstly, this store would be open for trade in 2018. It will be one of only 3 that Waitrose will open in that year. This year, 2016, they opened 5 in Truro, Solihull, Uttoxeter, High Wycombe and Worcester. Next year, it will be 3 stores at Haywards Heath, Evesham and Banbury. There are no other stores proposed in Kent. Secondly, quality. This is fundamental to the whole ethos of Eclipse Park. It has been achieved with the Next store, and this development will be no less. After Next opened, Gallagher's did have quite a few companies knocking on their door trying to muscle in, but none of them have matched the Eclipse Park brand in terms of quality. That is until Waitrose arrived. They are all about quality and innovation, whether that be in their approach to energy efficiency or how they look after their staff. For instance, this store will achieve 35% reduction in energy relative to the requirements of Part L of the building regs. They support their staff through training and apprenticeships. They are all partners in the John Lewis Partnership, and they are empowered to take control of their progression in the business. Overall, as we've heard, there will be 200 jobs and a further 200 involved in the construction and the fit-out stage. Waitrose get involved in the local community, whether it's by supporting local charities or offering their customers free coffee and a newspaper. That is why we did have such support from the public throughout the consultation period that we did. Finally, design. We're particularly pleased with how the design of the store has evolved, and we feel that it delivers that gateway marker required at this location. We've also taken on board the comments made in the representations, for example, from Boxley Parish Council and Councillor Harwood's request to include indigenous trees and planting and to help increase biodiversity. Eclipse Park is an established and growing centre for local commerce. A Waitrose store here will help attract further quality investment and employment to the park generally, will also improve the amenities for those who already work here, and the investment, as we have heard, in excess of £14 million in this new store is a sign of the commercial confidence in the borough. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, the legal officer had a question on what the planning officer said, so I think we have to bring that up now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the officer can just clarify, you mentioned a condition 23. Is that an oversight, or was it just the amendment?
It's a new condition suggested on the urgent update.
We're both trying to find it on the urgent update and not having a lot of luck.
For some reason, it doesn't appear to have made it onto that urgent update. I will check. Just if you could bear.
Right. Well, that might explain why we couldn't find it. Right. Whilst that's being checked, Councillor Harwood, you indicated first. This is on the cusp of East and North Ward, so I'm not particularly showing favouritism. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, this is a very vexed site. I mean, as you recall, the site was protected in the draft 2000 Maidstone Borough-wide local plan, but the inspector imposed an allocation for B2 in the local plan, but that was strictly within certain parameters, that the site had a campus feel, i.e. was kind of leafy and green, I suggest that means, because of its situation in the foreground of the area of outstanding natural beauty, and the fact that it is green field. Subsequently, however, we've seen a hotel permission and a large out-of-town retail built on the site. So I think the spirit of the B2 high-value employment has been lost somewhat. And just to correct something that the case officer stated about the site, the application site being the site of the former Park and Ride. Part of the site is a site of the former Park and Ride. The other 50–60% of the site is actually greenfield. So I think we do need to understand that. And the point has been made around the stand of TPO trees, which were TPO because they were in the foreground of the AONB. I saw the writing on the wall to a certain extent because of the next permission and so on, and I've tried to be as kind of constructive as I possibly can in terms of the evolution of this scheme. But I've got to say it was very difficult because actually the site is car park and the building, and there was more land given up to soft landscaping at the Audi in Wheeler Street, which kind of puts it into some sort of perspective. But the way that has been overcome is by taking forward the landscaping on the hotel permission in order to provide the soft buffer which will be required for so much car parking in the foreground of the AONB with kind of glinting and so on. And I'm a little bit interested in the perspective from the AONB in that you're going up to kind of Jades Bridge and to the KCC Country Park and looking down. I think the way that residents see it is they're looking from the residential area towards the AONB, and actually they see it from the other end of the telescope, so to speak. I am a bit interested in the prow because it seems like advertising on the motorway as well to me. However, that all said, I think in terms of the scheme, it is undoubtedly now a high-quality scheme. It does the most that it possibly can in terms of the landscaping and the materials and so on. I suggest. The one thing that we really do need to get pinned down, though, is the fact that some of the landscaping is outside of the application red line. And because of that, we need to ensure it is actually delivered, because the development stands or falls on the landscaping to soften the impact of a very large building and a very large car park. Therefore, I am happy to move that we do grant permission with the update in terms of the delegated power element. But I do think that we are going to need one of the kind of development committees to go along with the delivery of this. It's a big, high-profile scheme in a very high-profile location. If anything goes wrong, it will have a big impact on the character of the approach to the county town of the Garden of England. So with that caveat that we have a development committee, I will move that we do grant permission. Thank you.
Do I see a seconder for that? Councillor Cox was vaguely first. Would you like to speak now? And perhaps some specification from the mover and seconder as to the membership of that committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I bowed to Tony because I know of his involvement so far. I also was, my ears tweaked when Mr. Chapman said that the TPO trees will be removed. Could you be a bit more specific to which trees? And the word removed, actually, you know what I'm going to suggest and what I'm going to say. I would like to know, firstly, if you had a photograph, and I think it was that cluster sort of in the middle, those there on the horizon, or the ones in the foreground? Those there. Because that's really underneath where the building is, isn't it? Yeah. Obviously, I would not like to see those trees cut down. So therefore, I would like to say, I would like it investigated by the officers as whether we can transplant these trees and have that as a condition to look at putting them in if there is significant quality and they're of the standard that Councillor Harwood would like to see saved, certainly. I'd like to see that this is looked at in more detail. As to the working group that would follow this up, I'm more than happy to put myself forward as it sort of splits between north and east. I'd certainly like to be part of that, and I'm sure Councillor Harwood may be, unless there are others on the committee. But other than that, yes, I'm happy to second.
Right, Councillor Harwood briefly, and one at a time. Councillor Harwood briefly, as we're on what's actually being.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. I was just going to add, in terms of a development group, Councillor Greer has indicated that he would be very keen to engage in such a group representing Boxley, because actually this is on the cusp of 3 different wards, and Boxley Parish Council should be invited to participate. I think with East, North, Boxley, Boxley Parish covered, I think we've got everybody who's got a stake in this on behalf of the local residents. Thank you.
Was Councillor Hemsley indicating an interest? I just need to check.
I was.
I think we can add you, Councillor
as well.
Hemsley, as you are a North Ward member. And that gives us a bit of, shall we say, cross-party with Mr Greer. Anyway, I'm not going to take a huge amount of debate on this. The officer briefly, and then we're going to wind up.
Okay. In terms of the potential relocation of the existing TPO trees, that's something that can be explored as part of the resolution of one of the conditions that relates to landscaping, and I'm aware of the technology to which the councillor refers. Very happy with the idea of a development committee that's been mooted, and obviously we've looked at that and that's been agreed in terms of other major developments here. Condition 23, which was missing from your urgent update, I've got a copy in front of me which I could read out.
Yes, please.
Okay. Condition 23 suggested materials proposed to be used for the prowl feature shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The resulting development shall be implemented in accordance with those approved details prior to the first occupation of the building, and the reason to ensure a satisfactory external appearance.
Thank you very much. Right. I've seen lots of members indicating, but if you're just going... But I would like to stress that I really don't want lots of people saying the same thing over and over again. So if people have got particular points, questions and issues to raise, fine. But general statements, I'd rather not. Thank you. I would like to get the Aldin application started because Mrs Brown has indicated she has to leave at 7:30, in case you're wondering why I am looking to move ahead, because I'd like to get her in before she has to leave. Any points of substance, members? Thank you.
I've just been told, Chair, I need to read out in full the urgent update.
No, you don't.
Okay.
You don't. Yes. He doesn't have to read out the whole urgent update. We'll be here for a very long time if you do that. You don't have to. No, thank you very much. I'll make the assumption in this meeting members have read it. I am going to go to the vote unless there's anyone wanting to change what's on the papers or make it, or any questions, because I do want to get Mrs Brown in. Yes, Mrs Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm more than happy to support this application. The point I would just like to make is the connectivity between this development and the town centre. In the past, we've talked about a shuttle service to improve that, and I just wanted, I hadn't spotted it in the papers. Can it be taken up, please? Thank you.
I think that this was raised, the general feeling of ward members, correct me if I'm wrong, and I will bring people in as a substantive point has been raised, was that a shuttle service would not be a good idea, because what it would do would be to undermine the scheduled bus service. And one of the things we've been minded to try and do in connection with this and other applications is to significantly improve the connectivity through the scheduled bus services in detailed discussions with Arriva. A shuttle bus directly to the store would undermine the work of the Quality Bus Partnership, and the former member is Councillor Ian Chittenden and others have been doing. So I hope that's an explanation.
That most certainly is. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, the working party at the moment is Councillor Malcolm Greer, Boxley Ward, Councillor Martin Cox, East Ward, Councillor Tony Harwood, North Ward, Councillor Michael Hemsley, North Ward, Councillor Michelle Hasty, sorry, I'm tired, North Ward, Boxley Parish Council, and that's everyone that has indicated an interest. And I did think this has come up, so I have checked with the other two East Ward members who were, one of the other two East Ward members, Councillor Nagy, who was not minded to be involved. So I'm now moving to the vote on this application, which is to approve the recommendation to grant consent with the urgent updates and with the creation of the addition of condition 23 as read out, and the creation of a development committee comprised of the members I just read out. Is that agreed, members? Yes. Sorry, I should have said. Yes, that is, the officer indicated that could be taken as part of the condition. All those in favour? That's, are you indicating in favour or not, Mrs. Stockwell? I'm not quite sure. It's just difficult. Thank you. Those against? I take that as, from what Mrs. Stockwell said, she was voting against. Thank you. That's no abstentions because everyone's voted. Right, I now move on to the application number 12 on page 1, and I ask the officer to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. Application at 47 Freeman Way for the change of use of the property to a house in multiple occupation, parking, amenity space. Within the description as well, there's a conversion of the loft, a dormer window and roof lights. You can see the property there lays within a residential area with the parking area attached to the front of the property. I'll just take you through the photos and some plans, and then I'll talk through the issues. It's the rear view of the property.
Turn your microphone on. Yes. I'm talking about the audio. It's supposed to be doing the audio.
Different one.
Yes.
So it's different to one.
No, I just said.
I'll switch down.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. I was checking some notes and hadn't noticed myself.
There you go then. You're wrong.
Yes, I know. Officer obviously didn't hear me say it 4 times, but he was in the middle of doing something, so it's not his fault. I've already said that we would, because Councillor Brown has to leave, and we do need... Right, sorry about that. We are now back on track.
Okay. Type of boatyard. This is an There we go. Seamless. This is an application for the retention of a mobile home for the use as a live-work unit in conjunction with management of this boatyard. It's a retrospective application. The recommendation is to approve, subject to condition. There is an urgent update. Members are advised that there are currently 2 mobile homes on the site. One being the mobile home subject to the application, the other being mobile home used for storage. The storage mobile home is subject of a lawful development certificate referred to in the committee report and brings with it a commitment for 1 mobile home only to be stationed on the site. If members see fit to allow the mobile home, which is the subject of this application, to remain, that will remain, but the storage one will be removed by condition. And there's a suggested amended recommendation that within 3 months of the date of this consent, the existing mobile home being used for storage and sited to the northwest of the mobile home, subject to this application, shall be removed from the site. Reason in the interest of visual amenity. The application site is shown in red. It's a boatyard, and the mobile home is shown here, indicated at the centre of the screen. We have some photographs of the boatyard itself. I will quickly flick through these and just to pause when I see the mobile homes themselves. The white one here is the one currently used as storage that would be removed. The green one here is the one subject of this application. Obviously, it's a retrospective application. And here's another photograph of that. Some plans of the caravan are there. The key issues in this case, the mobile home was previously refused planning permission on the grounds of flooding and represented unsustainable development, unsustainable location. In terms of the current application, Yalding Parish Council has objected. 7 representations have been received in support of the application. In terms of the flooding issue, the proposal is located on a platform, the height of which is acceptable to the Environment Agency, and obviously it's been there for a while. It has survived floods in 2013. And in terms of means of escape, should there be a flood which affects it, several boats have been provided to provide a means of escape. The proposal is therefore acceptable to the Environment Agency in terms of flooding. In terms of health and safety, while the Council's consultant questioned the need for a permanent presence on site, it is clear from the submitted evidence that on-site assistance that this mobile home has provided has helped avoid severe harm to individuals resident at the boat yard. In terms of security, the police consider that a permanent on-site presence is a deterrent to crime. In conclusion, despite the proposal being considered to be development in an unsustainable location, for the above reasons, the proposal is considered acceptable, subject to conditions, including the removal of an existing caravan used for storage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I take any declarations of lobbying on this application? Right. Okay, first and I think only speaker, Councillor Brown, Yalding Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman, members. I'm here because Yalding Parish Council will always object strongly to any form of residential development in a flood zone 3 or 3A, which this is. We do not agree that a manager needs to be on site 24/7. With regard to flooding, each responsible boat owner, if staying in their boat overnight, should be registered individually to receive Environment Agency flood alerts and flood warnings. They can also have direct contact with the EA floodline if necessary. At the time of a flood warning, boat owners should leave their boats and make their way to a safe place. It is not a responsible attitude to rely on the boatyard manager to issue these warnings. The existing management can be relied upon, but this may not always be necessary if the property was sold. In the officer's report, I see no mention of Maidstone Borough Council's strategic flood risk assessment, which was prepared in 2008 and updated in October 2016 at the request of the local plan examination inspector. In the 2016 document, it quite clearly states if a proposed development site is located within areas at risk of flood, safe access and egress in times of flood will need to be demonstrated. Consideration to alternative access and egress routes should be made in the event that primary routes are inundated with water. The primary routes to this site would be inundated. It is not sufficient for the applicant to state that he will ensure the site is vacated prior to flood. We are talking about adult boat owners, and as with the built environment, if someone says they're not leaving yet, there is nowhere they can be forced to leave. By this very nature, the access route can quickly be cut off, leaving people unable to leave at a later time and putting their lives and those of the emergency service personnel in jeopardy. There is no alternative access to this site other than by river, which should not be attempted during a flood except by specially trained personnel. With regard to theft and vandalism, boat owners should expect to make their property safe, and any hazardous items stored on site should be kept in a suitable locked place. Other boatyards in the area do not have 24/7 managers, and we do not feel this applicant has sufficiently demonstrated that the need outweighs the flood risk, and we would therefore respectfully ask members to refuse this application. And I would like to ask the Chairman if he could ascertain why it has taken 4 years for this planning application to be determined. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. We'll come back to the points you raised in a moment. There are no ward members here, are there? So, Councillor Bolton, you indicated first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I've just been reading through the Environment Agency's comments, and it's quite hard to sustain a grounds for refusal based on what the Environment Agency have said on this, I find, in all honesty. So one question I do have is, and it's 8.21 in the papers in front of us, and it mentions at the top of page 9, the EA acknowledged the applicants already subscribed to its floodline warning direct service. Well, perhaps to beef that up somewhat, would it be appropriate to put a condition in that it would be a requirement for anyone living in this particular dwelling to subscribe to the flood alert system? Could we perhaps beef that up somewhat?
I'd like to come back on that point.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Porton's comment in first. The condition 3 sets out the headings in terms of the evacuation measures as set out in the flood assessment, and suggests those need to be maintained at all times. It's possible we could beef those up, but certainly the view of officers is that is sufficient to provide the safeguards that relate to your question. In terms of the comments of the Parish Council, I think it's clear that the Environment Agency do not object to the proposal to retain this caravan in residential use in conjunction with the management of the boatyard, and consider that one, location on a platform safeguards it from flooding to a sufficient degree, and secondly, that means of escape via use of appropriate boats is adequate. So I feel that issue is covered. I would also say that in terms of the comments of the police and in terms of the previous flooding issues, you know, there are additional benefits to an on-site presence. And finally, the fact that other boatyards may not have a 24-hour presence does not in itself negate the terms of the proposal here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Prendergast. Oh, sorry. The point about Mr Bolton, are you satisfied with the answer, Councillor? Okay, thank you. Okay. Councillor Prendergast.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to what the officer has said regarding this application and also to Councillor Brown, and I'm not convinced that anything has changed from since this application was last refused. I'm not convinced by the security measures argument at all, because at this rate, that's akin to saying that every farmer in the borough could be applying to put a caravan to cover their outbuildings, which have their tractors and their equipment. It's, you know, security can be addressed in a different way, and I don't think this is the right way in a floodplain. And I'm not convinced it's right on health and safety grounds either. So I would like to move that we refuse this application on the same reasons, for the same reasons that it was refused previously, that it's an unsustainable development in an unsustainable location. It's a flood zone, and it's as simple as that. Thank you.
Unfortunately, it isn't as simple as that. Some of you may know Tovel Boatyard, which is inclined to flood. This council, this planning committee refused a planning application for Tovel Boatyard because we know it floods. The EA chose not to object and to say everything was fine, which is essentially what they're doing here. And it went to appeal, and the council lost, and we were told, don't be so silly, you objected on flooding when the EA said there wasn't a flooding issue. So I'm not saying we can't turn it down, but it's not as simple as just reiterating that we think there's a flooding issue when the Environment Agency quite clearly said that they're satisfied that there isn't. So I think we might need a somewhat different argument. Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. I have one pre-question. Why has it taken so long? Is there something that was taking a long time to prepare, or we needed information? And that's prior to me asking the question that will follow that response, please.
Thank you. My understanding is we were awaiting further information which has been received in the last 6 months.
And to ask about what? If I'm allowed to. Come on, Mr Chapman, you're being very political about this. Just tell us what. Thank you. OK, well, expecting it to be something that may be just in the annals of time, if we're concerned that this mobile home is at risk of flooding, haven't there been some mobile homes very close to this that have all been fitted with pontoons underneath them and extensions to all the facilities so that should they flood, it just raises up on pivots and then goes back down again? I think that's within about a couple of miles of this. If we're that worried, then I was just wondering, because this is from 5 years ago, they might not have had that technology. And therefore, is this a good thing that we should be looking at, or has it been considered while you're still looking? Thank you.
My understanding is because it is on a raised platform which the Environment Agency consider to provide adequate and necessary mitigation, such pontoon technology is not required.
OK, thank you very much.
Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The point I have for officers, there's a lot of content which doesn't seem to be planning related, such as whether someone would be able to help out in an emergency, whether someone on the site would be beneficial. And taking some of the points mentioned earlier, it is clear that if we tried to condition those, they would not really be enforceable conditions under planning. So if I try to sort of strip that back, what I really see is a change of use of this land. And I'm just wondering, if I'm sort of doing the balancing act and I take away all of the things which are non-planning matters, what is the benefit of this to indicate that we should change the use of this land?
Well, I think things of the nature of health and safety can be planning matters. So I'm not sure I would completely concur with the point that's being made. And I think the other point to make is that the caravans, as is mentioned in paragraphs 8.10 and 8.11 on page 7 of the report, the Planning Commission is not being sought for the stationing of the mobile home, which is lawful by virtue of the lawful use certificate previously granted. It can be used for ancillary uses to the boatyard without consent. It's only its use as a permanent dwelling for the site manager that is the subject of the application. So it is, I think, relevant to bear those circumstances in mind. Obviously, it's up to members whether they consider it to be acceptable in planning terms, and the officer has outlined what he feels the relevant issues are in this case. But certainly, in my understanding, issues of health and safety, indeed issues of flooding, are relevant to consideration of this application.
Given that you asked a very pertinent question about whether those issues could be conditioned, I'd like to ask the legal officer that, because we're essentially treating health and safety as a planning consideration to overcome the flooding issue. So can we condition certain things in that situation?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say yes. The officers would have done an assessment against the various tests for which a condition is appropriate. Is that correct? So they would have done that assessment. They believe it is. Now, bearing in mind that flooding is a planning, a planning consideration, there is no reason why we cannot impose something like we have done. And I presume you're talking about condition 3 here, about the flood measures. Is that correct? Because
I mean, let's just, to be devil's advocate, let's say, for instance, this person who is the site manager was to sell that static caravan to a family relative who was not interested even slightly in any sort of health and safety issue on the site. Would we really go in there and take enforcement action to counter that?
sorry, but there is a condition which says that it shall only be used as manager's accommodation in connection with the bridge.
If I can respond, Chair. I think the use of such a restricted, indeed equivalent sort of personal condition on a consent is quite a common mechanism, and indeed enforcement officers will be using evidence, surveillance and other measures in order to establish whether such a condition was being adhered to. So while that's not always straightforward, I think there are equivalent circumstances which we do deal with commonly. So I don't think this is anywhere out of the ordinary in that respect.
Thank you. While members think about that, I'll take Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Though Councillor Brown and I have some disagreements over the relative merit of foxes being one, I think, on this, we're absolutely at one. I mean, having been very heavily involved in the various travails of this area over the last 30 or so years with flooding, this area is very unforgiving in terms of the speed that floodwaters can arrive and the velocity that the floodwater moves. And because it's an island site, it becomes isolated very, very quickly. And do not think that the Environment Agency's early warning is foolproof. I mean, certainly as recently as December 2013, we had some issues, let's say, around here where we did not get early warning and people were trapped. And we need to think about not just any future resident of the mobile home, we need to think about those individuals who need to go in there and get the resident out, maybe in the dark with fast water and so on, which is not easy. Putting a mobile home, which is very fragile, and I've seen mobile homes after they've been through floodwater in this part of the borough, it just does not strike me as sensible. In terms of the location, that is a totally unsustainable location where there is no residential, and we would never allow residential of any other sort. I frankly, like some other speakers have said, I cannot see what's changed since the last application, frankly, other than the potential flood levels are much higher. There is another issue that we need to take account of here, is that upstream of our borough, we have the live flood storage area. There is an off-site inundation plan for the live flood storage area, which essentially is planning for an uncontrolled release of the water that's stored at the site. If that occurs, there is very little early warning, if any, and the impact is very rapid and very significant. And I feel, frankly, it would be irresponsible to formalise residential within this location. So I would be supporting the recommendation to refuse in this case. I think there are cases where you can make an argument. I think this site, because of its isolation and because of it gets cut off so easily and access and egress becomes cut off, I can't in all conscience support it.
Right, Tony, I think you're going to have to do something about developing further those last couple of sentences of yours, because if it's a straight issue of flood risk, we're on a hiding to nothing given the EA's comments, which is what has changed. So are you able to structure something around the isolation and the difficulty of getting into and out of the site, for example?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to frame the grounds for refusal, I would talk about the unsustainability of the location for residential. I think that's the critical issue. We would not ordinarily allow a gypsy and traveller caravan, let's say, in this area, and I don't see that there is an overarching need to have residential here. So I don't think there is a strong enough case made by the applicant to have staff on site. That's one issue, which it does not overcome the unsustainability of the location. I think there is another issue in relation to the island's nature of the site, and even though you may raise the mobile home on a platform above the AOD, actually in terms of the surrounding road network can become cut off, and if the individual is cut off and becomes, falls or injures themselves or whatever, or there was all sorts of scenarios, and that's what I would flag up. I'm not saying that the caravan on the platform would flood, though it might if there were reservoir inundation from the upstream flood storage area.
Okay, fine. I think that's beginning to go in a direction that might be arguable. Councillor Powell.
I think Councillor Harwood actually mentioned the things I was going to say.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stoll.
Just to say that I would second Councillor Harwood if he's proposing refusal. I think if you look at 8.7 on page 6, 8.07, it actually acknowledges that planning permission was refused in the past for residential use there, in unsustainable development, the risk of flooding and all those things. And nothing has changed other than in 2013 we had a massive flood. So the only thing that's changed is even worse. So I think we'd be absolutely, could have egg on our face here to allow this, and I think we should, as Councillor Harwood said, go along with refusal.
Thank you very much, members. Right. I'm just going to check that we're absolutely sure what's been proposed. The first part, was, correct me if I get this wrong, Councillor Harwood, Mrs Stockwell, was that there's this unsustainability of the location, to summarise, not being overcome by any perceived benefits in health and safety. Secondly, and the second ground, a refusal, notwithstanding that the site itself would not necessarily flood, the difficulty of getting to and from such an isolated location still involves a considerable element of risk. Something like that.
Yeah, I think we need to develop the point that it is genuinely an island site.
Yes.
The land around it is
Yes.
lower, and therefore that floods and
I was
access and
summarising.
egress is impossible, and that's the problem.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think we've got that, and we can write that up accordingly. Well, the planning officer's got it anyway. Just going to have the officer read that out.
I'll have a go at seeing if I've captured the essence of the objection. The application is refused due to its unsustainable location and its inaccessible location when island location when affected by flooding. These points are not overcome by the perceived benefits of the proposal.
So I think you need to say something about the difficulty of getting it in and out of the site during a flooding.
Well, I've said inaccessible.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, members, I think we're there. Unless anyone wants to tweak that, and I don't see anyone. Oh, sorry, I better take the legal officer. I know.
Seconded, Councillor Pendergast.
Well,
but on other grounds.
it was.
And then,
Well, no, the proposal moved by Councillor Prendergast was on significantly different grounds. Therefore, which are not sustainable, and therefore we are not going to be moving forward with that. We have a proposal which has been moved and seconded, which do have sustainable or at least arguable grounds, and I'm putting that to the vote. Those in favour of the recommendation proposed and seconded for refusal on the grounds set out. 10, I think, because Martin's hand went up very late.
sorry, can we do that?
Okay, anyone against? No one against? Any abstentions? Councillor Bolton. Thank you very much. Right, we will have a 10-minute break at this point.